This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy and Jared Kushner. He sat down with Axios for a wide-ranging interview, which included a back and forth over the infamous Trump Tower meeting with the Russian attorney, Veselnitskaya. And
it was impressive. He's a new man, I think.
Well, he showed more emotion than he's shown in the last 3 years combined, just in this one interview, to this one question. Not taking any guff.
Let's talk about one thing that you did do. On June the 8th, 2016, you were sent an email with an offer of help for the Trump campaign from the Russian government.
I'm sorry, which email are you talking about?
The email from Ron Goldstone.
Look, Jonathan.
No. My question to you is, why didn't you pick up the phone and call the FBI? It was an email that said Russia, that said the Russian government was trying to help. Like, why didn't you do that?
Jonathan, we're in a place now where people are playing Monday morning quarterback and they're being so self-righteous. Let me put you in my shoes at that time, okay? I'm running 3 companies. I'm helping run the campaign. I get an email that says show up at 4 instead of 3 to a meeting that I'd been told about earlier that I didn't know what the hell it was about. Okay, I show up at the meeting, I stay for 15 minutes, it's a clown show. 1 second, no, let me finish this. I text my assistant and say, can you give me a call to get me the hell out of here? This is a waste of time, I leave. I never would have thought about that meeting again, okay? Had there been something that actually was nefarious at that meeting that came up, maybe we would have done something different. But the reality is that the meeting was a total waste of time.
I need to stop you there. We're talking about Russia here. They are a long-term adversary of the United States. Decades of hostility, including spying. Does it not set off at least some alarm bell when you see an email saying that the Russian government wants to help the campaign?
Like I said, the email that I got on my iPhone at the time basically said show up at 4. I didn't scroll down. I never would have thought about that email.
It had Russia in the subject line.
Again, I would get about 250 emails a day. And so I literally saw show up at 4. I showed up at 4.
Would you call the FBI if it happened again?
I don't know. It's hard to do hypotheticals, but the reality is that we were not given anything that was salacious.
Well, the other reality is the Mueller report, Volume 1, concludes no American was involved in a conspiracy to collude. That would necessarily include Jared Kushner, as it would necessarily include President Trump. So it's fascinating to watch the D.C. press corps continuing to saw sawdust on this. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, there are a lot of unanswered questions about what Mueller could have investigated, perhaps did investigate. This is the magic included word that John Hindraker picked up on in Powerline blog we mentioned on Friday. In Mueller's press conference, Mueller's words, 2 years ago, the acting attorney general asked me to serve as a special counsel. He created the special counsel's office. The appointment order directed the office to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. This included investigating any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. So the directive was Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. It included any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. What else did it include? If it was about 2016 in toto, should it not also have included the Hillary Clinton campaign? And yet nary a mention. This is something John Soloman picks up on in his latest piece. John Soloman is one of those individuals, I would say, along with Kim Strassel and Byron York, who've done incredible reporting, in-depth, original, investigative reporting for the last 2 years on this whole imbroglio. And he's got another good piece out in thehill.com about questions he has for Hillary Clinton, or maybe questions he's hoping, say, one Connecticut U.S. Attorney Durham may ask Cam Clinton before that inquiry is wrapped up. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by the aforementioned John Soloman, award-winning investigative journalist and executive VP at thehill.com. John, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you.
So Yeah. What about just before we get to your piece that Hindraker over at Powerline picking up on included investigating the Trump campaign. Well, what else, right? I mean, isn't that
It
a
wasn't
very
exclusive to the Trump campaign,
Right.
except that it looks like the prosecutors only looked in one direction, and I think that
Yes.
is why you see Bill Barr appoint a special U.S. attorney in Connecticut to look at the issues that obviously Mueller didn't look at. And if you listen to Bill Barr over the last 2 weeks, he sounded some very he's so underspoken, but he clearly took some shots at Mueller. He said that Mueller's team didn't interpret Justice Department policy correctly. He made Mueller correct himself after the press conference when it came to whether the Office of Legal Counsel opinion was the real reason they didn't make a decision on indicting Trump on obstruction. Obviously, he told the Attorney General 3 times that wasn't the case. So I think you see in the last 3 actions that Barr took, a concern that maybe Mueller didn't do a complete job, a thorough job, didn't give us the answers we all needed to put this thing to rest, and that's why we have John Durham in Connecticut now.
Well, there's what he didn't do, and then there's also what he did do. John Dowd, his phone call between himself and the counsel for General Flynn that was edited in the Mueller report. And we now come to find out the editing characterized the call much differently than was the truth about the call, which was completely innocent, not an indication of an effort to obstruct. And John Dowd is none too happy about it. He said to Sean Hannity the other night, we also know the entire report by Mueller is a fraud, and we're going to find more of these things. The entire report is a fraud. That's a big statement.
That is. I will tell you that in my own reporting in the last few days, talking to defense witnesses, defense lawyers, U.S. intelligence professionals, there are several statements, several claims in that report that those witnesses, those sources are now telling me are inaccurate. And I'm going to be working on this for the next few weeks, testing the accuracy of important conclusions in the Mueller report. And if they got the Dowd thing wrong through creative editing of a tape, imagine what else might be wrong in that report. And I think when we're all done, and also keeping in mind that Barr said they got the Justice Department policy wrong on certain legal interpretations, you have to wonder what else is wrong. And if there are significant errors and all of those errors tilt towards a more negative picture of Trump, then you have to question whether this was a fair investigation. And I think that's the direction we're all headed in, a real deep dive analysis of what is true and what is inaccurate or misleading in the Mueller report.
Now, you wrote a wonderful article in The Hill. People could see it at thehill.com, where you talk about Hillary Clinton's role in Russian collusion. Can you explain that?
Well, think about it. It's about 18 months now since we first learned that it was the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee, using their law firm as a cutout, that hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, to try to influence the 2016 election. Christopher Steele, by his own admission, was desperate to defeat Donald Trump. He was a foreigner. By all accounts, his efforts were among the most intrusive by a foreigner in the 2016 election. He gathered intelligence that was inaccurate. He then took it to the FBI. When the FBI passed on it the first time, he took it to the Justice Department, to Bruce Orr, to the State Department, through various people, and he persisted until he got an investigation of Donald Trump started before Election Day. And that included an intrusive warrant on Carter Page and spying on the entire Trump campaign through that venue. And yet no one's asked Hillary Clinton in the media or in a prosecutorial setting that I can find, what did you know and when did you know it? Did you instruct Christopher Steele to do these things? When did you find out he was going to the FBI? When did a political opposition research project suddenly turn into a criminal investigation that turned out to be meritless? And I think I've seen Hillary Clinton do maybe 6 or 10, between 6 and 10 pretty significant interviews. Not once has she been asked any of these seminal questions. And you could argue Christopher Steele's intrusion as a foreigner on the campaign was among the most significant in recent American history, yet no investigation and no hard questions of Hillary Clinton or her campaign yet.
And I like the rundown of all the subordinate players in this drama that you include in the questions that should be asked of Hillary. your interactions with Bruce Orr at Justice, with his wife Nellie, who was at Fusion GPS, with Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS, with Steele, with the assets that were run at people like George Papadopoulos. You include the academic Joseph Mifsud, for example. All the intelligence the heads at CIA and obviously FBI. Also, too, I would include in this list husband Bill and the real interaction between, say, Bill and Loretta Lynch, the AG at the time, on that airplane in Arizona, and how that all came to be. What do you know about unmasking of General Flynn, or unmasking generally, or your interactions with Obama-era officials like Susan Rice and Samantha Power? All that should be asked and answered too, shouldn't it?
They should. If we could get Hillary Clinton to sit down, there's probably 100 questions. I tried to pick 10 that are seminal right now to where John Durham and the Russia investigation is going. But you're right. I mean, if you look at this and you step back from the fog of war, this is one of the greatest dirty political tricks in American history. A campaign managed to sic the FBI on its rival campaign during the election using foreign-born, and it turns out inaccurate, false allegations to get that criminal investigation started. If you go back through history, you can't find another presidential campaign where that happened, and yet the perpetrator, the Clinton campaign, has yet to really face any tough questioning. And I think that is something that will fall into John Durham's lap. It's something that could fall into Lindsey Graham's lap at the Senate Judiciary Committee. But someone has to get to the bottom of these questions so we understand the full extent of how this is carried out, so it can't ever happen again.
Do you have any sense of, two things. One, there was some rumoring about AG Barr being currently in possession of the DOJ Inspector General report that is forthcoming from Michael Horowitz. One, do you know anything about that? And two, what about the investigation by the U.S. Attorney out of Utah, Huber? And, is that ever going to produce anything or come to a conclusion?
I don't get a sense that there's been a tremendous amount of activity on the Huber level. Now, here's one of the great reasons why. If you remember, one of the things that was kicked his way was, did the FBI possess information of criminality by the Clinton Foundation that never got investigated? Well, I broke a story last November where these two former DEA Justice Department investigators filed their own complaint at the IRS, and it turns out with the Justice Department alleging criminal activity by the foundation. Very detailed, written just like an FBI agent would write a predicate for the opening of an investigation. And so at the last minute, when these guys were about to be called before Congress at a hearing, John Huber called them. His office called them and said, hey, let me take a look at this document. They said, well, sir, you've had it for 4 months. I don't think there's much evidence that Huber took much of the evidence that was coming at him or the allegations seriously. There's no evidence of a grand jury or significant activity. I think all of the action is going to be in Connecticut related to the Russia collusion investigation and, as Barr likes to say, putting the thumb on the scales of justice. I think that's where the real action is going to be.
And the Horowitz report?
It's in various stages of conclusion. I think there have been some recent revelations in my story a couple of weeks ago about the State Department memo, which showed that there were contacts by Steele at State, and State was questioning his credibility before the FISA warrant. That was a new development that the IG might not have been aware of. So there could be a few delays, but I think we're on track for a release before the 4th of July, barring any new revelations that come up. I think there are conversations going on between the department and the IG that normally happens on a complicated investigation, and then the final report will be forthcoming. I would guess before the 4th of July.
Do you think there is going to be some reckoning with respect to those senior level heads of agencies and their immediate subordinates at FBI and CIA and maybe in the Obama administration when this is all said and done? Or is this just wishful thinking that there's going to be such a reckoning?
I think there'll be a public reckoning, right? I think that Bill Barr is determined to get every piece of information out about how this dirty trick was carried out, who was involved in it, how was the FISA court misled. Whether there'll be criminal justice is another example. Let me just give you something that happened last week that flew below the radar of a lot of people. Last Wednesday, the same Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, released a report that directly found evidence that a senior FBI official, a deputy assistant director, was involved in numerous improper leaks, one of them a violation of a court order, a sealed court order. And the Justice Department, the Bill Barr Justice Department, declined prosecution. So there was a slam dunk case of being able to prosecute a senior FBI agent for leaking something that would have violated a court order, among many leaks, and yet no criminal justice action was taken. They declined prosecution, sent that person back to the FBI to be disciplined. So there'll be some disciplinary action at the administrative level, but you look at that and you compare it to the recent action of the indictment against Julian Assange, and you wonder, all right, if you're charging someone with soliciting leaks and yet you catch an FBI agent overtly leaking, why does one get charged and the other doesn't? And I think the thin blue line question is going to come up time and again, which is, will the Justice Department go the final step and hold people criminally accountable? So far, we haven't seen McCabe be indicted a year after a report came out saying he lied to investigators. And we just saw a deputy assistant director of the FBI not face criminal charges, even in the face of criminal evidence.
Yeah, those are great questions to ask and discouraging events to this point. You're right. John Soloman, award-winning investigative journalist, executive VP at thehill.com. Check out his piece on 10 questions he has for Hillary at thehill.com. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.